We have a treat here today. My friend, a longtime friend from kindergarten playground is here, Ramsey Person. We used to share bologna sandwiches on the playground. That was a fun time. If you were to ask me then, if me and Ramsey would be serving together in ministry, I would say you're crazy. You're crazy. We have a long time friendship there, but blessed to have him here today. He's going to share with you about his ministry, him and his wife's ministry, Heather, and their family, and what they're doing at West Virginia University here today. And so a lot of you think, just want to give you some logistics of what's going to happen. At the end of our service, there will be some ushers in the back. If you would like to find out more ways of supporting him, first of all, is we need to be praying for him. Amen. As they are on the forefront of ministry, working with college students and molding them, and you're going to hear about that, sharing Jesus Christ with them, and how that is the best decision they will ever make in their life. It will change them forever. That's what they're doing. And so that's number one. But if you would like to give towards their ministry, there will be an opportunity as you leave today, and then over the next 4 weeks, we're going to be doing that as well, if you're not prepared for that today. But he's not going to say that, so I'm going to say it for him. But we want to love on him, so let's support him. Let's get behind him. And so let's give him a warm welcome as he comes forward and shares with us today.
There we go. Forgot to turn the mic on. Good morning. It is good to be here. And Keith is right. It is an amazing thing that we're in ministry now, both together, because that time in my life I was not walking with Jesus, and it was so great to have a friend like Keith be there for me in those times. And he's right. Bologna sandwiches were a big part of our childhood. In so much, we joked about this between services. It was just like 2 days ago, I told my wife, I'm really craving bologna sandwiches. Can we stop and get some bologna on the way to the lake this weekend? And so I don't get it that much anymore, but man, I still love bologna sandwiches. When Keith and Pastor Craig told me to come speak, they asked me to do the whole sermon, which I'm excited to get into, but I would love to give just a very short update on how ministry has been going at WVU, because I know you have been praying for us and supporting us for a while, and we very much appreciate that. And this past year has been one that we've seen a lot of growth in our ministry. I think somewhere around 50% of our ministry we've seen 50% growth in our ministry from students, and numbers aren't everything, but I really do feel like we're seeing a more genuine interest in college students towards faith and Christianity in general. I think as they've looked towards secularism and the different things that has promised, freedom and peace, to do your own thing, they're finding more emptiness and anxiety than they expected. And so a lot of them, I think, are turning back to Christianity and other things in faith in general. So we're excited to see a greater interest in that and the growth that we've found in our ministry. And I ask you to please continue praying for them, because this really is the next generation of students. I mean, these students are going to be leading our communities and our churches and our country and even the world in many ways. And so please be praying for us and for just the next generation as they're coming up. And as they asked me to preach, I thought, why not give something I would teach our college students, as you guys can get an experience of what we kind of teach on a Thursday nights when we typically have our meetings. And so I pulled something. We were in John a little while ago, and I'm going to be preaching from John chapter 8. If you want to turn to that, you can in your Bibles. But as you listen, take yourself back to when you were 18. That's maybe a little bit further for some of you, and others, you're probably looking to your neighbor going, I remember when you were 18, and Keith can definitely give you all the dirt on me when I was 18, so if you want to ask him about that, you can do that later. But to start, I wanted to ask a question. If you see this list of universities, these schools, I want you to think, if anybody can tell me what they have in common. Probably not. There's some great schools up there, Xavier, Caltech, Johns Hopkins, a lot of good schools. University of Tennessee, I think there was a vol in the first service, and she talked to me about it afterwards. But the thing they have in common is their school motto. It's Veritas Liberabit Vos, which is the Latin for the truth will set you free. The truth will set you free. It's also carved in English on the wall of the original CIA headquarters. You can see there, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. And I'm sure we've heard it at one time or another. The funny thing about it is it's actually a quote from John chapter 8. It's Jesus speaking here, and I think that the way that this has been used to kind of indicate truth, meaning general knowledge, will set you free to have success and whatever, things that a college degree might they think would bring you. And I think that's grossly taken out of context for what Jesus is actually talking about here. Because I think he's going to something much deeper than all of those things. And then that's what we're going to be talking about. So we're going to pray before we get started that we would hear from the Lord through this. God, I thank you for this morning, for some time to preach from your word. I pray that, Lord, you would speak through me to be true, Lord, to what you have spoken to us and what you would like to teach to everyone here. And Lord, that we would know what it means to be set free from the power of sin and the slavery of sin in our lives, and to know the truth of your freedom and how we can live in you. In your name, amen. So we're going to be looking at John chapter 8, verses 31 to 34 today. So if you can turn there, I'll read it out loud as well. So Jesus said to the Jews who had believed in him, "If you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." They answered him, "We're offspring of Abraham and have never been enslaved to anyone. How is it you say you will become free?" Jesus answered them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, everyone who practices sin is a slave to sin." So to get a little context, we're reading from John, which was written by John, and he wanted to prove that Jesus was the Messiah to the Jewish people. He's the Messiah that they had always been waiting for. And so he's proving that Jesus was God. And also in John chapter 20, verse 31, he says, "But these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name." And so up until chapter 8, Jesus has kind of been building his ministry along the way. He's been kind of gathering his disciples and teaching some more, and things have been kind of growing throughout his ministry. And in chapter 7, things have really started to heat up for him. There are some Pharisees and people that are trying to kind of put him down and put him in his place. They don't really like what he's doing. Some of them are even looking for a way to kill him. And then he turns in chapter 8 and kind of teaches this lesson with a great message of hope. And it says there that the people who had believed in him, he's talking to people that believe in who he is. He says, "If you continue, like if you abide in me or continue in me, you are my disciple, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." Yet there's a group of other people there. We don't know who they are at this point in the passage or who he's talking to. I'm not sure if they're part of the believers that he just mentioned or a different group of people. If they were maybe some of the believers that he's referring to, maybe they're experiencing doubts. I don't know. Or maybe they're people that are not believers. But regardless, there's some naysayers in the crowd. I'm trying to kind of confront him on this stuff. And he says, and he could have answered their question, but their question is, like, what are you trying to say that we're not free? We've always been free. What are you saying by this? And Jesus really could have taken this a bunch of different ways. I mean, the Jewish people have definitely not been free their entire history. He could say, well, you were enslaved to the Egyptians and exiled with the Babylonians, and even now the Romans control you, so you're not free. What are you talking about? But that's not what Jesus does. He goes a lot deeper. He's going to their soul and where they're at with their soul. And he says, if you practice sin, then you're a slave to sin. So this sets up the two main points we're going to talk about today, the slavery of sin and the freedom of Christ. So it would be helpful to start out, to talk about the slavery of sin, kind of what he's talking about here a little more clearly. So he's talking about people who says that have committed their lives to sin. Like they've really committed to something more. It's not just someone who's like sinned that day or like has sinned or does sin, but someone who's really committed to it. But he does only give two options. He says either you are living for yourself, and which would be a life of sin, or you're going to be living and abiding, as he says, in me. And so those are your only two options. And we'll talk a bit more about that. But I like the way the Matthew Henry commentary put it. It says this, it says, it's more than just one who sins, otherwise God would have no servants. It's he that makes sin, that makes choice of sin, prefers the way of wickedness before the way of holiness, that makes a covenant with sin, enters into league with it, and makes a marriage with it, that makes contrivances of sin, makes provision for the flesh, and devises iniquity, and that makes a custom of sin, who walks after the flesh and makes a trade of sin. So that's kind of what we're talking about there. So, he's not talking about, like we said, just someone who sins, but someone who's given themselves to it. But as I kind of gave an example, I love working on my car. That doesn't make me an auto mechanic. I've been remodeling my basement, but I'm not a general contractor. I even have an engineering degree, but I could say that I'm not really an engineer because I haven't really given my career or my life to that at this point. So I would say, I'm in ministry. That's something I've given my life to as a career. But in the same way, there's a difference between someone who has given their lives to sin and who hasn't. But here's the catch. He does say he doesn't give a middle ground. You can't say you're somewhere in between these things. As we said earlier, you're either for yourself, which is sin. We think of it as all these bad things, like someone who's given to sin may be this terrible person. But he doesn't define it that way. He defines it as someone who's given themselves to sin is giving their lives for themselves. And that's what we see a lot in college as well. Or you're going to give your life to Christ in a different way. And so as you're giving your life to Christ, there is no in the middle. And so, we're going to be talking, so to continue on, I see this a lot in our college culture today too. We see it all the time where students don't want to be confined to a dogmatic kind of belief of Christianity or something or other religion of just rules that they have to follow. They want to live their own way. They're almost anti-religious and anti-God in a lot of ways. Now, I did say that we're seeing a turn from that, which is great, but we still experience this a lot too. They want to choose what they want to do, when they want to do it, and how they want to do it all the time. And I have a story even that exemplifies this. Every spring break, we go down to Panama City Beach, Florida, and with our students in our ministry, and we share about Christ with all the college kids that are down there for their own spring break. And one particular student I was talking to one day, we were talking about the meaning and purpose of life. It was a good conversation, and we have a tool that we use that kind of helps them think through these things. And he said, I don't see anything here that represents my view of the meaning and purpose of life. And I said, okay, well, just share with me. What is yours? And he said, in one word, I would say the purpose of life is autonomy. And I was like, wow, that really defines the fall. Adam and Eve wanting to do things, choosing to do things their way instead of God's way. I mean, it all goes back to that. He thought autonomy. Similarly, I don't know what happened to this, but in 2014, Burger King changed their motto. I never saw it actually go on their buildings or whatever, but I saw it in the news and I saved it because I just thought it was so unique and said a lot about our world today. So after 40 years of have it your way, they changed it to be your way. And they said that it was a statement that they wanted to remind people that they can and should live how they want anytime. It's okay not to be perfect. Self-expression is the most important, and it's our differences that make us individuals instead of robots. So it's no longer just freedom of choice for what you want on your hamburger. It's a freedom to do whatever you want whenever you want that they see as the most important thing. And that's the message that they wanted to give us with their company. And we also have to realize that this is the stuff that we don't just see in the news and in the media. This is the stuff that the college generation has grown up with. They have had it almost every day, all the time. That's what they have grown up with all the time. The problem is having that choice is a false sense of freedom. Doing whatever you want whenever you want is not freedom. And I say that because you have to think about everyone has a choice. Everyone does. The question is, what does that choice lead to is where you're going to determine whether what you're choosing is true freedom or not. You think about your phone. You have a phone. You have the freedom to look at your phone, do what you want on your phone whenever you want. But so many of us, and many of the college generation a lot today, are addicted to this. They can't put it down. They can't stop looking at it, and it distracts them and pulls them away. And I know that's true for so many adults in the world today as well. We'd like to do this with our ministry, and I challenge you guys to think about it. What would it look like to do a media fast? It seems crazy now, where we've put away all screens, all media, TV, internet, everything for a week. Just how does it sound? All you use your phone for is to make a phone call. That's what a phone used to be for. But, I remember those days too, and I wish we could go back. But for a lot of us, and our college students in particular, it's extremely anxiety driven to think about not looking at their phone or internet for a week. Like, it brings up a lot of anxiety. How does it make you feel if you were to do that? What would you think? Food. We have the freedom to eat whatever we want, whenever we want. But the choices that we make can have effects on our body. They do. And it can have poor choices there can have health effects that will affect us later in life and bound us and bind us in ways that, limit us for our ability to do things. And we can also, so just similarly in the ways that we have those freedoms and they have consequences and the way that they can bring limits, our choices of sin and where we exercise our freedom, if it chooses sin, then it's going to lead to more bondage. I like the way, this was from a youth pastor, one of our students had this quote about it, and I kept this one as well. It said, "Sin will take you further than you want to go, keep you longer than you want to stay, and cost you more than you want to pay." So I think another way to think about it is think about, what can you not live without? Like, what is it you think about in your life? Man, if I lost that in my life, that would be really bad. Or maybe think about it, and what do you think you deserve? What are the things in your life you feel like you deserve that are entitled to you? Some of us are huge sports fans. I like sports a lot. What if we had never got to watch another sports game? How do you feel about that? What if you didn't get your nightly time to relax with your favorite show? What about your money? If that was taken away, the financial security that you may have with that, or your phone, we talked about that. What if you never, for the younger people, I'll say this for the younger people in the crowd, what if you never got married? Have you enslaved yourself to the idea of relationships and the idea of marriage? If you cannot imagine your life without some particular freedom that we have, then you're not actually free at all from that thing. You're enslaved to that thing. And so I'm going to share a story. It's a personal story. I'm going to share my mom's story. So my mom entered college. She went to Virginia Tech. She entered college at 18, 5'1", blonde girl. She went into the program of animal science. She had an older brother who was 2 years older than her. And so she got plugged in really quick with a group of friends, with kind of his group of friends. And among his group of friends was my dad. So that's how they met, which was a fun story. But they, as far as I know, they started enjoying the freedoms of college like a lot of college students do, which is partying and drinking and doing different things. My mom went on to do very well. She graduated salutatorian of her class in animal science. She then went on to the Veterinary School of Medicine, where she was in the very first graduating class from that school at Virginia Tech, one of the only women to do that as well. And they got married, parents got married. She had 2 great boys, raised them, and pursued her dream as a vet for a long time. But after long days at work and 2 crazy kids, she would have a drink at night to relax, which eventually turned into more than that, where she was needing a drink more than just to relax, more than for social gatherings. So my mom was an alcoholic, but I can say that not once in my life did I ever see my mom drunk. And it was in 1999 when my brother and I were pretty surprised when we had to take her to the hospital because her liver was failing. Amazingly, though, she recovered after, the doctor said she had 2% liver function. There's no way, this is really bad. But then she recovered, and they thought it was just like a miraculous recovery that she lived. And for 4 years or so, she was sober. They gave her a choice, said, if you keep drinking, you will die. So for about 4 years, she was sober, and I came home from college. I remember I went to our storage room looking for something, and I pulled out some boxes that I thought were about the right size of what I was looking for, and in it I found a bottle of vodka, and I thought, oh no, Mom's drinking again. And it was about I told my dad didn't know about it, and and we talked to her about it. She said, it's just too hard. It's just too hard. I can't do it, but I'll keep it more under control. It was about 4 or 5 years after that. I was actually on missions in Thailand. I was finishing up some 2 years of mission work in Thailand. And my dad called me and he said, Mom's really sick. You got to get home. And I emergency flew home. I got there on a Friday night, and Saturday was one of the hardest days of my life as my mom's body continued to fail. Keith sat with me in the hospital that whole day, and she passed away Sunday morning. Just shy of her 51st birthday. She didn't get to see her kids get married. She didn't get to see her grandkids. She didn't get to experience an old age with her husband. Because sin takes you further than you want to go and keeps you longer than you want to stay and costs you more than you want to pay. Now, I understand that turning from an addiction is far more difficult than just choosing not to do it. But so is a decision to follow Jesus. It's hard. He's asking for your whole life, everything about you. It's either him or it's sin. You get to choose that. And so I do want to talk about what the freedom is, the benefit that does come from choosing a life with Christ and accepting the gospel with him. We gain so much more when we choose that. And so we're going to talk about the freedom of Christ. As the truth shall set you free, right? And so Jesus starts by telling us in this passage, he says, if you continue or you abide in the word. And we know from John chapter 1 that Jesus is the word. So he's saying, if you continue and abide in me, you are my disciples. And that's the foundation point of starting for all of that. Freedom starts, and it says that was what sets you free. It starts by abiding in Christ. It starts by giving our lives to him. And so, as I said, it's more than just some small choice. It's not going to church on Sunday. It's not praying a prayer at some point when you were a kid. Those are good things, but that's not what makes you a Christian. He's not asking for just this small part of your life. He's asking for everything about you, all of it, to give everything to him. You see this in Matthew chapter 16, verses 24 to 26. Then Jesus told his disciples, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what will profit a man if he gains the whole world but forfeits his soul? Or what shall a man give in return for his soul? So he's saying that, as we just said, he's saying, what is your soul worth to you? Everything, right? Finding freedom of the soul is worth all of it. Everything is owed to him. And he's already saying that we've already said we have two choices. It's either our own works or his. Because he's saying you do have the choice to try to live it. Here's the mark. It's perfection. If you can make that yourself, go ahead and try. And you can live for yourself and do it yourself. Or you can live for me, but I'm giving it to you. I've already done it. And that's what Jesus is offering, is the perfect life that he's already lived and already done and giving it to us. And so when we do choose that, he's saying you get two things out of that. Truth. The first one is truth. You will know the truth. I would point out that he didn't say all truth. We don't know everything. He's referring to the truth of knowing why we were created, the purpose of who we are and why we're here in the God that made us. He also didn't say a truth either. He said the truth. He's not saying this is one choice that you can make among many options. I'm just one way to heaven or one way to God. He didn't say that. Later in John, we see another quote from Jesus where he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. No one. I am the only way. Jesus is the only way to God through that. But he also said we have freedom. We have freedom. that if we choose to give our life to him, that our freedom actually grows. It's this crazy counterintuitive thing where we think if we do what we want, it's free. But he's saying, no, give up what you want to do what I want, and you are actually more free than the other way. And I have a slide that this makes sense to me. I hope it makes sense to you. But, so there's this diagram, like every other worldview or religion or whatever will have some type of box that you have to live in to be good enough, to fit that description. You know, you have to give money, pray, go to whatever church or temple, you know, community service, call your grandmother, read whatever religious text. And that's just one particular one that you might see. And then if you do the things outside of that, then you're out. You can't be a part of that community or that worldview. And now, what goes in the box may change. That's a topic for another discussion where, a lot of the things outside the box are now in the box for a lot of our college students. But, the idea is that there's a box, do this, and that's it. But I really believe Christianity is the only one that's different from this. And that's because the box is totally removed. There is no box because the life has already been done. There's nothing you have to do to get into the box. Jesus has already said, I've already done it. I've given it to you. And now you have the greatest freedom because you can choose to do the good things on this list because they're good. Not because you have to, but because they're good. So I feel like that's the biggest freedom that we have. And even when we do choose sin, like we said earlier, we're not committed to sin in the same way as believers, but even when we still might sin in some way up there, we're still loved and we're still accepted. We're still sons and daughters of God. It doesn't change in any way. And so this to me is the greatest freedom that we can have. It's the thing that says that when you choose Christ, your freedom grows with him. And so the take home, what are we going to walk away with today from this? I'd say really three things. First, you may need to determine what's in your own heart. Maybe you've been living your whole life for yourself. And sure, you may not be a bad person, but you've been living your whole life for yourself, and that's a life in sin. Even if you've been coming to church for your whole life, there may need to be a place where you choose Christ for the first time to give him your whole life and to abide in him in that way. Maybe for those of us who have chosen to live for God our whole life. We've chosen to really commit our lives to Christ in that way. We abide in Christ. There are still some freedoms that we're holding on to, that we've enslaved ourselves to in some way. We do have a saying, it's kind of a joke, but we have a saying in West Virginia. I don't know if it's common here or not. We tell guys, don't drink, don't smoke, don't chew, and don't date the girls that do. In seriousness, though, you might be thinking, yeah, I'm pretty good. I don't do all that bad stuff. I'm good. I really am. I don't do any of that. I go to church. I don't date the bad people, and I'm a good person. But be careful, because your image of a good person might be the thing you're actually enslaved to. So lastly, I would say live in the freedom that Christ gives. Are we still living like we have a box? We don't have a box like that. We can choose to do these things just because they're good. You have the true freedom to do that. And living like that is not the way Christ wanted. He wants us to experience his freedom and love and grace. And to know that when we fail, he still loves us and still cares for us. So I want to share one more story from a current college student that we have. Her name is Ainsley. She is a rising senior in our ministry. She's a performance arts major for ballet. So she's a dance major. And so her degree and her future are literally based in performance and how she performs. And you talk about an environment that can be difficult to live in and can be pretty toxic. She wrote out kind of like how she came to know the Lord. And I'm going to read it because these are her words that she wrote and spoke to our college students. And so it'll be, imagine me as a 20-year-old college girl. So from a young age, I felt bound to unrealistic expectations regarding my dancing and physical appearance. Every class, I would pick myself apart, both physically and mentally, while staring into the mirror. This mindset led to a prolonged feeling of self-hatred. I began to hate how I looked, what I ate, how I danced, and how I acted. Everything about myself seemed unworthy. Anxiety and depression distorted my reality. This thought process prevented me from understanding how Christ sees me. Though, as I went through high school, I began to understand God's character. While there was not a specific moment that I feel during my high school years when I genuinely gave my life to Christ, I realized that I was in desperate need of him, that I'm miserable without him. There is nothing that I could do to earn his favor, but he is eternally gracious to forgive and renew what was broken. Jesus paid the ultimate price for brokenness, even mine, by dying on the cross. He forgives me and calls me his own. If I truly accepted his forgiveness and renewal, why wouldn't I believe that my identity is secure in him? It wasn't until I fully grasped this concept that I was able to live in freedom from my toxic past, learning to trust him and trust that I was created in his image and has taken me some time, but through him I am able to walk in freedom from my past. I don't need other standards of what I should be. But I need only to trust in what God has already declared over me. God has shown me how to approach art in such a way that makes much of him, unlike how I felt before. Dance now reminds me of him. It became a safe space and an offering of worship. I have never known such peace. I now know what true peace is, and I understand that my identity has always been secure in him. I'm going to pray and close. God, I thank you for this time, and I pray for people, for each of us here, to consider where we're at, whether we've given our lives to you and have been abiding in you, or whether we need to evaluate maybe what freedoms we've been holding on to. And Lord, please show us your grace, your love, as we live out the freedoms that you have given us, the freedom that you have given us in your grace and your gospel and your love as we've given our lives to you. In your name, amen.